sweet and, now I would have said I didn't give birth to them all. I got no supplies, nothing. And fortunately in those days there was a warehouse in the school district where you could go and get some supplies. And at that time Elmer Gallegos was the head of the Spanish bilingual program. And so I was able to go down and scrounge things and buy things from my own pocket. The best part was I could take recess anytime I wanted. And there was a little pocket park on Cap Street, which later became a terrible drug thing. But I would take the students over there. And outside of my little classroom, and I was all alone in this building until the spring semester when Graciela Sprites joined me and we started a first grade. But there was a large common room that the church used. So if it was raining, that's where we would take our recess. And occasionally the pastor would come downstairs and he'd say, "Too noisy up there." And I'd have to say to the students, "Shh, this is God's house." And then they'd say, "Said we were going to school." And I'd say, "Well, yes, this is school too." And it had a submersion baptismal. And the kids always wanted to know when they could go swimming. And the ironic part was that every Friday I had to strip the entire room, and I'm talking about walls, everything, because they used it for church school. So every Friday was like the last day of school. And every morning, every Monday, I would get there an hour early to put my decorations up. And I had a little cubby, which was supposed to be where they hung their coats, but it was like 3 coats to a cubby. And I would stuff everything in there. And the warehouse had some fabric, I think it was for home ec classes or something, and I remember this red gingham that I had, and I would thumbtack it all the way around. By the end of the year, I couldn't thumbtack it, there were so many holes. But when I think back, I never thought about what would happen if something happened to me. What would happen if something happened to a child? I had no phone. And walking across, South Van Ness and, with this trail of students. We had 2 other classes from Sanchez, which I believe, if I remember, were a first and second, and they were in another church. I believe it was a Methodist church, and it was on 16th and Market, burned down many years ago. Now they've, Josie's Juice Bar was there or something, and now they started to build something. The next year I became a resource teacher, which meant I was going into classrooms and doing demonstrations and providing staff development. But I remember visiting there, and that church had a lot of theatrical performances. And the floor, it was either the 2nd or the 3rd floor where those classes were, they had stored scenery. Now in those days, I was much more slender. But even at that, I had to go down the hall sideways with the stage. And I often thought, if there's ever a fire, these children will never get out. Thank God, it was many years. They had gotten out many years before that. But that was the situation where we had started. Now, at that time in the elementary, there were some ESL pullouts, but I don't know where they were funded from. In some cases, they had a teacher who was getting comp ed funds, or they had a volunteer who might work with the students. And in some schools where there was somebody who spoke the language of the majority of students, they might have that. But there was very little involved. Post Lowell, or actually just before Lowell, there was in 1971, Title VII came in. And that's where many of the Spanish bilingual programs got their funding from. And so that was kind of the start of that. After Lowell, of course, we had an expansion of ESL pullout on the elementary. I worked primarily with those teachers. And we were able to provide staff development. But it's still the issue. I remember visiting teachers. I think it was at Visitation Valley Elementary. And the ESL teacher was in the custodians. It was a concrete, looked like a bunker almost. And she was in the middle in what had been the custodian's office. She did buy a rug, but it was so cold in there, she always taught with her boots and her coat on. And on either side was a boys' and a girls' bathroom. So in between flushes, she'd have to stop. Another situation, they put, and I can't remember the school, but they turned over one of the boys' bathrooms. And I remember running out and buying lovely plastic flowers in little baskets and hanging them from the urinals because I couldn't stand it when I would go in there and I was always facing this wall. So Lowell brought us, certainly it was the start of many positive things, but it still took a very long time. I'm going to stop now. The one thing I do want to say, some people said, noticed that I work I'm volunteering at San Quentin. I've been going there for 12 years. And of the just under 5,000 inmates, including the 700 plus on death row, a very high percentage are undereducated. And that's why they're there. So I see a lot of what happened in their schooling